What made you immediately leave a restaurant? Story 1. When they blame the customers for not liking bad food. I had that happen at an Italian restaurant when I was asked how my lasagna tasted. I politely told the waitress it was okay, which was generous. It wasn't. She rudely said, "Too bad you don't know good lasagna." My wife was shocked. Lasagna is almost always what I order when at an Italian restaurant, and have had amazing eating experiences. No tip, no return. That kind of happened to me once. I was working on a Saturday and got caught up in a very hectic day. Went to the only restaurant that was still serving lunch at like 4 p.m., starving. I was the only person in the restaurant, but I figured that was because it was so late in the day. I ordered pad thai, but when it came out, it was more like a 2-day-old chop suey. It was gray, gluey, and inedible. And cold. I never send food back, but I did, apologizing constantly and asked if I could see a menu to try something else. I also said I was happy to pay for the original dish as well, since clearly I misread the menu. It turned out I had not. The owner came over and explained to me that that was how you made pad thai. I was very confused because I've had and made pad thai regularly and none of the ingredients were the same. But I apologized and said I must have been confused. Then he threw me out, since I clearly didn't have the right palate, and said he wouldn't make anything else for me. I apologized for what had to be the 10th time and left. Years later, when I moved away, they were still open and still never had any customers at any time I walked by. And they were in a very popular and expensive downtown area. At the time, I was mortified. Now, I'm pretty sure they were washing money. Story 2. It's mostly empty and the staff acts surprised and confused about your presence. It's a hint that selling food isn't their main business. I love places like this. I've been to a few that honestly don't know what to do when you sit down. A Caribbean place where the staff had to talk each other through how to take an order from the restaurant before someone came to my table. A Mexican place that didn't recognize its own menu but had near constant takeout orders. This was before delivery services were big. An Italian place that had run out of pepperoni despite me being the only car in the parking lot during a weekend evening. They're still open 5 years later and I've never seen them busy. Usually, the food, when they have it, is decent at best, and the price is based entirely on how much money they're trying to clean. Happened to me, and it turned out to be great. They were just surprised because a white Irish guy walked into their restaurant in a back alley where the outdoor sign was only in Chinese and the menu in Chinese. They didn't have an English menu, only other people eating there were Chinese. Turned out to be great food, but the small number of customers there all looked at me like I was some weirdo. Maybe it was a private club or a work canteen or something only for employees. They looked after me though, showing me pictures of food to choose from. This happened to a friend of mine. She and her boyfriend were walking around a city and decided to stop at an Italian restaurant for lunch. All the windows had shutters closed and the lights were off, but the open sign was on. When they went in, all the chairs were on the tables and everyone inside looked surprised to see them. An older lady basically dragged them to a table, got them phenomenal wine and didn't ask what they wanted but made them fresh pasta and sauce. While they were eating, people kept coming in and dropping envelopes on the bar top. Everyone was nice to them. It was the best Italian food and wine that they had ever had, and the old lady refused to take their money. They went back to that street, but the Italian restaurant was gone. They are 99% sure it was a mafia front and they accidentally stumbled into it. To be honest, there used to be a Chinese restaurant in Harrow that was like this. My wife and I used to go every month because this old fella that ran it should really cook. The place wasn't the best kept, but there was something so good about his cooking. We'd often be the only ones there, but he was just this nice old Chinese dude and he was always really happy to have a customer. He was kinda getting frail though, so we'd sit near the back of the restaurant near the kitchen to spare him having to walk too far. Went to a bar in Baltimore with my wife and in-laws a few months back while we were killing time before a rain delay Orioles game. The only people in the place were the bartender and 2 guys at the bar, who were either his friends or just regulars that came in all the time, but they were all shooting the crap. When we walked in, the bartender shot us this look and said, "How dare you people come into my frickin' bar right now?" We ended up staying for a few hours and spending a lot of money, so by the end he was nice, but we almost walked out immediately over how cold and unwelcomed it felt. If it wasn't pouring rain, we probably wouldn't have stuck around. There's a French bakery in our town like that. Went there one afternoon and all they had was croissants or something equally mundane. The tables were all stacked with papers. It absolutely screamed money laundering even for someone as naive as me. But the bizarre thing was that they had newspaper articles and Google reviews all talking about how great the brunch was. Maybe they just weren't used to getting afternoon business, but I'm not sure where anyone would have even sat to eat a meal. Maybe all the good reviews were just a cover-up, but you'd think they wouldn't want to make it sound too good, since confused people like me might show up looking to buy desserts. Story 3. I went to a diner near me recently that I had never heard of. There was no one eating at the tables inside. The woman who was at the front entrance walked away into the kitchen when I walked in the door. Then a dude came out of the kitchen and stood in her place and refused to acknowledge me. Then a girl came up and said something to him, and he said, I know, just calm down, it's okay." Then she scurried off into the kitchen. I asked the guy if I could see a menu, and he said, "She'll be right back." I left. I don't know what was going on there, but I will never eat anything from there. Sounds like a front. My fiance told me about a pizzeria she worked at as a high school kid. She just made subs. They wouldn't let her handle money, make pizzas, or take anything out of storage. Never take care of a delivery. The place was cash only and closed after about a year and a half. She always thought it was weird. I was like, "Babe, you never worked in a pizzeria." In a town I lived in, there was a small pizzeria that opened around the same time I moved there. I went there within my first week of living there and immediately went, "Oh, this is a front." They were literally selling slices of frozen pizza for $2 a slice and not hiding it. Canned soda for $2 too. There was a meal deal that was 2 slices and a can of soda for $5. That's it, literally. Well, actually, if you wanted to be fancy, you could get 3 slices and a soda for $6.50. The joint had literally 4 bar-style seats, no salt, no pepper, no bathroom, no nothing. The staff weren't rude, but they looked rough, like rough. They didn't smile or make small talk and more or less had an attitude of, "Oh, you're here. You want pizza? Fine, here's your pizza. Get out of here." Here's the thing. It was a college town, meaning that this freaking awful janky joint became wildly successful almost immediately. I obviously became a regular because it was right next to my workplace and was the only place walking distance that sold soda with fast service. Anywhere else and it was either marked up stupidly or it was rude to not get any food. And I had a big gap in my schedule between the end of work and the next bus home like twice a week. I needed somewhere to sit for 20 minutes and read a book, you know? After a year, they expanded to have 12 whole-ass tables, 4 2-seat, 8 4-seat, a single-stall unisex bathroom, and a milkshake machine. It went from random questionable people staffing it to having the very same jolly but still questionable-looking guy consistently serving this sad, greasy pizza, along with a rotating assortment of very large, muscular men that didn't actually attend the restaurant at all, but rather stood in front of the entrance to the staff room. Sometimes a group of 3 to 4 people would walk in from the street to the staff room and not come out for hours. When they were around, the jolly man would act a bit more severe, but other than that, it just continued on. I cannot stress enough that this was the worst freaking pizza place ever. It wasn't even good frozen pizza, it was terrible. They didn't give you cutlery even. The paper plates were flimsy as hell, and even the cups for the shakes were like cheap semi-opaque ones that weren't insulated at all. Freaking uncomfortable to hold. But it was edible and fast and super close to the physics, psychology, and mathematics building of the university. They easily had a few thousand in profit from their meal deal each day because once when I got out early I watched Jolly Man serve like 60 people in the span of 10 minutes between classes. All of them were in the door, out the door, desperate students heading back to class because again, if you weren't desperate, I cannot stress this enough, you would never eat there. He probably could have served more if he hadn't run out of pizza, but once the between-class rush was done, I just watched him open box after box of cheap frozen pizza and pop them into this weird little heater thing. It was truly fascinating. Oh, and the milkshake machine was clearly Jolly Man's passion project. He used it to make all sorts of weird crap. Once they had the milkshake machine, I almost always ordered one of those instead of a soda. The PB&J shake was my standard, but Jolly Man started with 8 or 9 shake flavors available. And added another couple every month. Just this ever-growing list of shake flavors. There were like 40 last time I was there. A stupidly large number. Since I was basically the only person who went there regularly and actually sat down, I got to be a guinea pig for a ton of his new flavors. I remember pumpkin mint being one of the weirdest ones. Freaking weird joints and Jolly Man definitely gave me the vibe of someone who lucked into his dream job. That said, even he could be kinda scary. Once there was some idiot harassing his girlfriend, or ex maybe, and Jolly Man absolutely menaced that little creeper into leaving. Then he gave the girl a free soda. I liked Jolly Man and avoided eye contact with everyone else who wasn't buying pizza there. Ha, here's a story for you. I went to take my car in for service. I had a couple of hours to kill, so I thought, I'll find a coffee shop. I googled coffee shop, and there was a high-rated one a few blocks away. I walk over there, and there was a guy behind the counter and a few Asian dudes sitting around a table. They kinda looked at me and stared for a bit. The guy behind the counter stared at me for a while too, before returning to look at whatever he was looking at. I just kinda stood there for a bit, and after not being acknowledged, I went to the guy at the counter who stared at me for a bit longer. I was like, do you guys have a menu? He stared at me again, then handed me a menu. I'm like, do I just sit down? He stared at me for a bit longer and said, okay. I sit down and I'm feeling super uncomfortable with all the weird long stares. I felt super unwelcome, so I was debating bailing. Then an Asian lady comes out wearing lingerie and asks for my order. That's when I realized this was one of those Vietnamese coffee shops where you're served by scantily clad women, and all the weird looks I was getting was because everyone in the shop knew I had no idea what I was getting into. Story 4. Someone handling the food while wearing gloves, but then using their gloved hands to handle money, open doors, touch their face, etc. Or worse, someone handling food with bare hands while there are open wounds or band-aids. I've seen it. Immediate nope from me. I used to work as a waitress at a pizza place with an open kitchen. We were really busy one night and a guy came to collect his order, but it wasn't ready yet. He was super rude and didn't like me at all. It was the waitress's job to put the garlic knots in the oven, so I washed my hands in the sink that was visible from the register. The guy literally watched me. I grabbed some knots to put in the oven, and he started literally screaming at me that it's so unhygienic to not use gloves. He's disgusted and wants the chef to do it, etc. So the pizza guy, who was wearing gloves, put them in. But the pizza guy used to wear the same gloves almost every day. He would grab stuff out of his pockets, handle cash, everything with the same pair of gloves. It was so gross. I still remember that interaction vividly 11 years later. I briefly worked at a fast food job as a teen. We had an older couple who would come in and nitpick everything, but they were particularly fussy about their food being put on the paper placemat and not touching the plastic tray. They would get very irate if they saw even a single fry off the placemat. We thought it was hilarious because the trays were sanitized, but those paper placemats would fall on the floor and just get picked up and added back into the stack. I would rather work in a place where they don't use gloves. Gloves have been proven to carry more germs because people don't keep clean like they would without gloves, because they think the gloves are full protection against everything, but all it does is keep the worker from having to clean their hands often, which is the problem. For spicy foods or preventing cross-contamination, they're good, but outside of that, I feel the laziness of workers outweighs the benefits. I hate to tell you, but there's nearly a 100% chance every time you've eaten at a restaurant, someone with a bandaged finger was handling your food. Whether it's a cut or a burn. When they get injured, they clean and bandage it and return to work. It isn't hard to keep things at a restaurant up to the health department code, and they're following the guidelines. It's like the people who see mentally handicapped cooking enthusiasts on TikTok or working in the food service and go, yuck, I'd never eat anything they made. There's probably snot and drool in it. Newsflash, If you've ever eaten at a restaurant that isn't a high-end $100 a plate type place, someone with an intellectual disability has handled your food on more than one occasion. And no, they didn't drool or sneeze or cough into your food. They're just as capable of following hygiene rules and food safety as anyone else, perhaps more so, seeing as how many normal people don't wash their hands after taking a crap. Story 5. Lots of flies buzzing around the tables in the kitchen. Similarly, cockroaches. I once walked into a sushi restaurant, sat down at the sushi bar, and looked up to see a cockroach climbing up the wall. Noped out right away. I tried to eat at a popular burger restaurant in Myrtle Beach, and we had to take our food to go because when sitting outside we were swarmed by flies. The staff saw nothing wrong with it, and we got weird looks from them and other patrons for getting our just-served food to go. The flies were bad before the food arrived. No way were we going to sit there and eat in that condition. Used to go to a fish market/grill place in the next town over. They were really reasonably priced and the portions were good. It was one of those places that had a market on the side where you could buy the raw fish, and the other side was a restaurant. Went there a bunch of times and everything was great, no complaints. Then every now and then we'd see flies buzzing around, which were like, okay, it's just a few flies, they have the fish market on the other side. And the door is open, so it's bound to happen. Then, the next couple of times we went, it got worse. I think 2 or 3 times after the first time we saw flies, we noticed a bunch more flies. Like 50 of them, buzzing around an area behind a booth, like some kid might have dropped something back there and no one did anything about it. It was so gross. We ended up leaving, and never came back. It's a shame because they used to be great, and they were one of our favorite places to get seafood, but I'm not messing around with it either. The flies were so gross I don't understand how they didn't know, or how they could ignore it. No way they didn't know. It was so freaking many. Many years ago, when I was a child, my family was road tripping through an area in India. We stopped off in a town and there were flies everywhere, in every building, outside, inside, literally everywhere. Not the small kind, but the fat bluebottle types. We went to sit in restaurant and yes, there were flies, not just everywhere, but squished in between the table and the layer of glass above. Obviously, I didn't eat a thing. I'm pretty OCD when it comes to food and hygiene. The restaurant was full. My mom and dad frequented a local Mexican restaurant because it was truly authentic and they enjoyed it, as actual Mexicans. They always complained about the flies that were always bugging them, lol. Later on, that same restaurant got shut down because the local health department found numerous egregious violations and errors. Most that couldn't be fixed immediately, hence the shutdown. They were closed for weeks, then for a few months afterward hardly anyone went back. My parents themselves stopped going at all. It's a miracle they're still running in my opinion because the backlash was so huge. Depends on the area, depends on what kind of precautions I see. I have worked at places where we would get seasonal flies, maybe flying male ants actually. We were clean, but the building was centuries old. We couldn't stop them some days, and it was embarrassing. They'd come mostly when it poured out at Dunkin' Donuts. Another time was when I moved here outside Philly on the New Jersey side. We had a water bug, giant cockroaches issue from the water main of the town. I'm talking about thousands covering the alleys of 3 restaurants and streets. You could keep those out much easier, but it's still disgusting walking over hundreds per square meter or yard. Those things were massive for a New England bug. It was a Sicilian place and supposed to be a bit higher end than a casual place. Fine dining my ass. Those suckers were big enough to worry about dragging guts in. Gotta get past the swarm to get your $50 bottle of local wine and lobster. It has come to my attention that our definitions of lots of flies may differ. For me, seeing more than 5 is a lot of flies. Story 6. No soap in the bathroom, and no hint that it just ran out, like there's no dispenser on the wall and no empty container on the sink. My local dive bar has the dirtiest looking but actually cleanest bathrooms. The graffiti is probably thicker than the drywall, but I swear there's always soap and towels, and the sink and toilet are clean. Oh god, walking into the bathroom and feeling like it's 1985 and you're going to the bathroom in a gas station alone on a car trip for the first time. It's all rusted or green patina copper under corroded chrome. There's no mirror, and for some reason, they're either using one of those old-timey Baraxo powder soap dispensers, or it's a bar soap that has grease or dirt somehow embedded into it. The sink has separate knobs for hot and cold, and it's a half turn to full blast for each. There is no aerator on the tap, so it comes out with more force than a fire hose. Soaking mostly your favorite logo t-shirt. Someone has somehow managed to scratch graffiti into the white tile as if they have diamonds for fingernails. The door not only shuts way too hard with the automatic spring, but also has the fourth iteration of a homemade bolt to secure the door, in addition to the lock for locking up the bathrooms at night. You're pretty sure that's a used condom in the corner next to the revolving lid trash can, but you don't want to look close enough and be sure. So you rinse your hands of the powdered soap that didn't melt or foam, and get the hell out of there as fast as you can, and not make eye contact with the monster inside the grate in the middle of the floor. You forget the key, attached by a chain to a mop handle, but you really didn't want to touch it after washing your hands anyway. It took too much nerve to ask the angry-looking gas station attendant for anyways. Goodness knows you don't want to bring it back now. Story 7. It's a bit specific, but if I'm looking to eat at a barbecue joint and I don't smell it well before I walk in, I know it's not going to be good. Ideally, I should be able to smell it from like a block away. Anytime I've ignored that instinct and gone in anyway, the food ended up being bland and dry as hell. The other clue for barbecue is not the cleanliness, like one person mentioned, but the level of decor in the dining area. If it looks like a Hard Rock / Famous Dave's, it's gonna be trash. If the front facade is faded and worn, it looks like a high school cafeteria, or even better, just has crappy plastic patio chairs and tables, it's going to be amazing. The barbecue joint near me smells so incredible. I used to hit up their great clips next door when I lived in the area and ask them how they could handle working next to that glorious smell all day. They said they don't, they go there often, and they know the secret menu and specialty items the owner doesn't advertise, and are just for a few. Drool. My fiance and I found our favorite barbecue place when one of his coworkers complained about it. He's from Texas, so he heard the words, "You walk up to a window and order the food by the pound," and we had to go check it out. We drove to a large property where you could see the deer and livestock they kept and raised for food, and could smell it the second you got into the parking lot. Absolutely fantastic food. Well, your nose and your tongue are basically the same, so it's a good sign that you're gonna like the taste if you like the smell. That said, I'm sure there are lots of places that just don't exhaust their kitchen's smell in a manner where it's easily smelled for a block around, because that is indeed a marketing trick for many food places. They'll very purposefully engineer the building to blow their smell around to try to attract people. If you can smell it a block away, they're likely doing it on purpose. But it's also a sign that they have so much confidence in their flavor profile and the smell coming out of the kitchen that they'll be able to broadcast it to all the neighbors and hopefully not offend anyone. Story 8. No prices on the menu. I hate it when they do this. I get it. You want fancy people who don't care about money, but even the rich people I know hate this because it's simply stupid. If you base your restaurant around your guests being financially irresponsible, I assume your food is crap. As a person who spends an irresponsible amount of money at restaurants, if I don't see prices on a menu, it's not for me. I understand if it's only a tasting and you'll upcharge me to hell and high water, but there better be a price on the tasting. A price for the various wine pairings, and it better be the same in person as it is online when I show up. If there's no price unless it's specifically a once-in-a-lifetime private experience, like one of those funky take a rowboat to someone's house in Iceland, I'm not going. Just no. We were vacationing in Niagara-on-the-Lake, Ontario, Canada, and asked the B&B host for a recommendation for dinner. She gave us directions to a nameless pop-up a few blocks away and said it was one of the best meals of her entire life. We found the place and it was packed. A 2-hour wait for a table, or we could take the last 2 seats at the bar. The bartender was incredibly warm and welcoming, gave us menus, and went to get our drinks. The menus had no prices, and the food was so out there that I wondered if we had stumbled into a Monty Python-esque parody of modern fine dining. It was along the lines of pistachio-encrusted African parrot, steamed leek and seaweed foam, extruded escargot with liverwort, and wheat husk. Literally nothing on the menu sounded the least bit appealing. I honestly wondered if it was a prank TV show with hidden cameras, seeing what kind of garbage they could convince people to eat under the guise of fine dining. We quietly, politely told the bartender that we would like to pay for our drinks, but that we wouldn't be staying for dinner. He was incredibly gracious about it, seemed genuinely sad that we were leaving, and refused any payment for the drinks. The exception to this is when you ask for it. There's a really nice restaurant in town that I like to take friends to. I go not super often, 3 to 4 times per year, but I always get the same waiter and the staff knows who I am. They print their menus on nice paper each day, and if you're having a special event, they will put your event name at the top of the menu. So I got the idea to ask them to do menus for me without prices. I know what it's going to cost to eat there, but often the friends I take do not. It makes it easy for them and for me to order whatever they want, and I'll handle the bill very discreetly. Not as serious as the other comments, but this is how I ended up spending $10 on a hot dog outside of SoFi. Granted, the dog was delicious, but looking back, I guess I should have asked what the price was before I had the hot dog in my hand. It ended up being just as expensive as the hot dogs in the stadium, which is exactly what I was trying to avoid by eating a hot dog before going in. On the other hand, on another day, I did get to witness a woman successfully haggle down a $5 churro in a very serious tone, like she was haggling for thousands of dollars of savings. I was equally impressed and terrified. Story 9. The smell of a dirty grease trap. After you've worked in a kitchen for a while, you recognize it instantly. It's an awful smell, and if a place isn't getting it regularly serviced, the rest of the operation is probably terrible too. I was going to pub trivia at a place I had worked at years earlier. As soon as I walked in, I smelled the smell, and it was strong. I ended up calling the trap cleaning service and setting up an appointment for them without telling the manager. I'll never forget this smell, and I'll never forgive the place I worked at for making my coworker clean it out during peak hours and then getting pissed at her for driving away customers. That is not a daytime type of job, fam. It's a middle-of-the-night shamefully whisk away the sludge and try to forget it type of job. And yes, if you do it regularly, as you should, it won't be nearly as bad, but that's not a manager's problem. It's a minimum wage worker's problem. Came here to basically say this: the smell is 100% the trigger for me. A dirty grease trap smell is unmistakable once you know it. You can also smell other things, rot, or just even general poor sanitary conditions, like a good-year-old floor spice. If I can smell the kitchen, not the cooking, I mean smell the kitchen from the dining room, I walk out. There is a Mexican place near me that everyone I know swears by, but I went there and went to the bathroom, which was in the back by the kitchen, and I could smell the rancid meat. I walked out and will never go back. Story 10. I got 2 from the same Dunkin' Donuts. A worker sneezed into his gloved hands and gave them a half-hearted wipe on his pant leg. Immediately after, a customer came in to get donuts, and I saw the man fill the order without changing his gloves. I went off and left. Later on, I went to leave a review explaining this and saw that I was not the only one to point out their disgusting ways. Someone else posted a picture of a worker with his shoes off and dirty socked feet up on a table, sitting right next to a window for the public to see. I'll share a similar story. I ordered at a Wendy's and I could see the kitchen staff through the pass. A worker pushed down on the mustard pump too fast and it squirted a line of mustard along their forearm. They took the bun that they were working with and swiped it across their arm to get the mustard and continued making the sandwich. I quietly mentioned it to the cashier taking my order, who happened to be the manager on duty, unbeknownst to me. She stomped to the back and screamed at him at the top of her lungs. Well deserved, in my opinion. A Wendy's had opened in my hometown, where I was an elected legislator at the town level. When I went there the first time, they were understaffed, and on a wet, snowy New England day, the floors were pure polished stone. People were slipping left and right. The woman about to handle my food scratched her scalp with her gloved hand and didn't change the glove. I told her to stop and asked her why she didn't change her glove. She was told that they were under orders to conserve gloves because of cost. Got the manager after that one. He got really snotty about it, basically told me to go forth and multiply. At that point, I'm mad. I went through the proper channels and didn't get a single human. Called the district manager and was redirected to prior channels. Finally, I put it in my board comment section that Wendy's was unsafe for those reasons, and the local news picked it up. The next day, I had a call from regional management. 2 days later, the entire store management team was gone. Story 11. Walked into a restaurant and I smelled sewage. They said a sewage backup had occurred and was being fixed by a plumber. I left anyway because the place was running like it was normal. No windows open or fans running to try and flush the smell. Yeah, it was warm outside, but seriously, I'd rather sweat than smell crap while I'm eating. The drains recently backed up at my work, bartender. It stank so bad, and I suggested closing the affected area as my work has multiple dining rooms. The plumber couldn't fix it and needed to leave to get something as the drain backup continued to rise. It got to 3 inches deep and I was called a baby by management and insulted. My job was basically threatened if I didn't continue to work and I needed money to survive. What appalled me was guests continued to come and dine, complain about the sewage smell/conditions, and be mad at my poor attitude when I literally had to drain water up past my ankles. A few good Samaritans filed complaints on my behalf, but management blamed me and said if I had a better attitude, the guests wouldn't have minded. The water coming out of the drains was thick and black, by the way. I had to work like that for over 4 hours, and some of the skin on my feet came off with my shoes. Yes, I am applying for other jobs. There's a restaurant in the same parking lot as one of my workplaces. I'm a floating assistant manager for self-storage. Ate there 1 or 2 times until I learned we had a shared line to the sewer system, with a Y split in it, and because of a pipe misalignment at the Y on their joint, the whole thing was plugging up from their notch in it, catching toilet paper. Both businesses have been fined by the city over it because they don't know who's causing it. The owner of the restaurant is asking us to pay for half of the repair and is being a bit rude about it. Turns out she's tried this before and the line never got fixed, because if we don't pay, she won't. Thanks for watching until the end. If you have a similar story to these that you want to share with us, please leave it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please leave us a like and subscribe. For more videos like this one right now, please stop by our channel. Thanks again, and see you next time.